We are starting a brand new series called But Wait, There's More. And I think most of us think life looks something like this. You're born, you go to school, you graduate, maybe you go to college, maybe you get a job, get in the career path right away. Maybe you get married, maybe you have kids. Hopefully you work 30, 40, 50 years and you get to retire, and then you die. And that's sort of it. There's life, death, and the end. I think that's a lot of us how we think about life, honestly. But what if that's not the end of the story? Right. What if death isn't the end, but is actually the beginning? What if there's more? Well, that's certainly what the scriptures teach. Over and over again throughout the scriptures, we see that there's more to this life than this life. Right. There's more to this life than living and dying. And in particular, and this is what this series is all about, we're going to be talking about these four things. Jesus is coming back. That's happening. Every one of us will stand before God. Doesn't matter who we are, where we're from, where everybody. And then every one of us will spend eternity either with God or apart from him. And if those things are going to happen, and Jesus certainly believed that all of those things were going to happen, then that shouldn't just sort of shape how we think about the future. That should shape how we live our lives today. So over the next 4 weeks, we're going to talk about all of this. And today we're going to spend time specifically talking about the return of Jesus. Now, whenever the subject of Jesus's return comes up, almost everybody asks the same question. It's the question you're probably already thinking in your head. When is Jesus coming back? That's the question everybody wants to know the answer to. Matt, when do you think Jesus is coming back? And honestly, people have been asking that question as long as Jesus has been gone. They've been asking, when is Jesus coming back? But what's interesting to me, at least, is that even though that's the question everyone wants to know the answer to, that's not the question everyone should be asking. Even though, look, I'll be honest, I would love to know the answer to that question, even though it makes sense to want to know when. The most important question isn't when is Jesus coming back. The most important question is this: will I be ready when he does? Will I be prepared when he finally shows back up again? Now, if you're not convinced that this is the more important question, I want to take you to the words of Jesus, and I want you to see for yourself. More specifically, I want us to look at Matthew's account of Jesus' life. You know, there's Matthew's and Mark's and Luke's and John's account, 4 different accounts. And this is Matthew's account. And Matthew, if you didn't already know, was one of Jesus' 12 disciples. Matthew went everywhere that Jesus went during their 2-3 year run. And near the end of Matthew's account of Jesus' life, he records a fascinating conversation that Jesus has with his disciples about his eventual return. But before we jump into this conversation, we're not going to be able to look at all of it. Before we jump into at least part of this conversation, I want to give you just a little bit of context. Jesus has just finished confronting the religious leaders, really giving them the business, telling them that not only is judgment coming their way, but the temple that they love and adore, this place where they worship, is soon going to be no more. It's going to be destroyed. It's going to be completely torn down, obliterated. The disciples hear this, and so they file that question away, and they're like, hey, we need to ask Jesus about this later, because if the temple's going to be destroyed, then surely the end of the world can't be that far behind. These two have to be connected in some way. So they pull Jesus aside, and they begin a conversation. Again, we're not going to be able to look at all of this conversation. We are going to look at some of this conversation. Notice how this begins. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, just us, Jesus, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? They're like, Jesus, we have a couple questions for you. And it may appear there's only one question being asked here, but it's actually two. First, they're asking, hey, Jesus, when will the temple be destroyed? We heard you say it's going to be completely obliterated. When's that happening? Follow-up question, connected question. They probably think these two go together, honestly. When will you come back to rule and reign? You're going to leave. We know this. You've told us this. But when you're going to come back, when is that going to be? So again, they connect these two questions together. They think they're probably related because when the temple's going to be destroyed, surely, it's a part of this apocalyptic event that's going to happen associated with this. So Jesus, how's all this going down? When is all this going to take place? Can you answer our questions? But as Jesus responds, and again, you can read all of this later for yourself, he goes back and forth between these two questions. In fact, they can get a little confusion because he kind of answers the question, then he answers the next one, then he goes back to the previous. He goes back and forth between these two questions. And this is one of the reasons people are, I think, confused by some of what Jesus said here. But with that said, I'm not interested in Jesus' response to the first question. We know the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. Some 40 years later, the temple is completely obliterated and destroyed. So we know the answer to that question. We know how that's been answered. But the one we want to look at is the second question, because this question, hey, when are you going to come back? When are you going to return? So what does Jesus say about his inevitable return? This question that they were asking, that a lot of us are asking, here's what he says first. But about that day or hour, no one knows. You ask me a question, when I'm going to return to rule and reign, to establish my kingdom, no one knows. Now, Jesus is going to say more. I've kind of cut him off right there. He's going to say more, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page before we continue. Because even though I believe Jesus could not have made this any clearer, this is so clear, some people still get confused about this. But Jesus doesn't stutter, so let me just explain what he's saying. He's saying, no one knows when Jesus is coming back. No one can know when Jesus is coming back. No one will know when Jesus is coming back until he comes back. That's what Jesus is saying. No one knows. About that day or hour, no one knows. No one has a clue when that day might be. And this isn't the opinion of some middle-aged, middle Georgia pastor. It's not Matt Walls' opinion. This is what Jesus himself said. In fact, he elaborates. He says more. Notice what else he says. But about that day or hour, no one knows. Not even, by the way, just so you know, disciples, the angels in heaven. Think about that for a second. Jesus says that not even these supernatural beings who are in and out of God's presence, who worship him day and night, who carry out his commands, who are privy to so many other heavenly, glorious things, not even the angels know when Jesus is coming back to rule and reign. God hasn't clued them in on Jesus' inevitable return to rule and reign. And then Jesus says something even more startling. He says, but about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor, and he's talking about himself here, nor the Son. Jesus now reveals that at least at this time, this specific time, this specific moment, even he himself does not know when he's going to return and reign. Even he himself doesn't know when he is going to establish his kingdom once and for all. Now, maybe you're thinking, because I hope you're thinking this, man, I don't understand. I'm not tracking, because how could Jesus not know? I mean, isn't he God? I feel like you're saying that all the time, Matt. He's God the Son of God. I mean, doesn't he know everything? I mean, how is there anything that he doesn't know? And these are great questions. If you're asking those questions, you're asking the right kinds of questions. And without getting too technical, let me give you a little bit of a theology lesson. It'll be a short one. But when Jesus came to earth, Jesus didn't stop being God. Jesus did not, he's still 100% God. He became fully human, okay, without ever ceasing to be fully God. But with that said, even though Jesus didn't stop being God, he did willingly take on some of the limitations of humanity. For instance, he personally distanced himself from some of his attributes, like his omnipresence, for instance. Jesus limited himself to a physical body. Before, he could be everywhere all at once. Now, he limits himself to a physical body for this period of time. Same thing with his omniscience. Jesus knows everything, but for this season, he limits some of the divine knowledge that he previously had for a season. It doesn't make him less God. He just limits himself in this way. And this is why Jesus could honestly say in this moment, because he now knows, but this is why he could say in this moment that he did not know the day or the hour, because at the time he didn't. But notice that this doesn't mean that no one knows. In fact, Jesus makes it clear who knows. He says, but about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only, I think we need to circle this word, but only the Father. Only the Father. Now, Jesus says that only the Father, at this point, knows. Now, before we go any further than this, because Jesus has a lot more to say, and we'll look at some of what he says, I want to reiterate something I've essentially already said, but it's one of those things where I just need to make sure we are all on the same page, that everybody is tracking with me. And so I'm going to tell you, as your pastor, first of all, as your pastor, I'm going to be very honest. I don't know when Jesus is returning. I can't know when Jesus is returning, according to Jesus himself. I won't know when Jesus is returning until he returns. This also means, and I know some of you are really smart, you don't know either when Jesus is returning. You can't know when Jesus is returning. You won't know until he returns. So in summary, and I've already said this, but again, this is about making it clear. There's a lot of wackos out there, okay? No one knows when Jesus is returning. No one can know, no one will know until he actually returns. That's what's being said. So if someone, including me, stands on a stage, creates a viral video, writes a best-selling book, claiming they've done the math, they've cracked the code, they put in the research, and they know for certain when Jesus is coming back, you can take it to the bank, they don't know. In fact, the more convinced I am the more convinced someone tries to make me feel that they know, the more convinced I am that they're off their rocker, honestly. Because Jesus says, no one knows. And so there's some options for people who say they know. When they say, because you hear people, God revealed that to me, or I had a dream. You may have had a dream, but it may have been a bad dream because you ate a burrito, It may be something else. Jesus didn't come to you and say, hey, this is when I'm coming back, because he said, no one knows. Or maybe they're a false teacher. That's possible too. Because according to Jesus, only the Father knows. And that honestly ought to settle the matter, because if Jesus says no one knows, then the reality is no one knows. No one knows. You don't know. I don't know. No one knows. Now, with that said, even though the day and the time are a secret, Jesus does take a few moments to sort of tell us what it will be like generally in the world when he does return. He says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man, another name for Jesus. So it will be when I return. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. Now, over the years, some people have tried to read all kinds of hidden meanings into what Jesus is saying here, but he's simply saying that when he returns, people will be doing what people have always been doing. They'll be eating and drinking, getting married, and things like that. In other words, Jesus is saying, when I return, when I come back to rule and reign and establish my kingdom forever, permanently, people will be doing all the kinds of things that they always do. Life will be normal. People will be getting up, going to work, exercising, eating, drinking, hanging out with friends, just like they were in Noah's day, unaware that judgment is just around the corner. And this last part, when it says, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away, it doesn't mean that they didn't have a heads up, because Noah, if you remember, preached and said, hey, it's going to rain. I know it's never rained before, but it's going to rain. I'm telling you, it's going to rain. You need to be ready. You need to repent. Noah told them again and again and again. They just didn't believe him until it started to rain. And what are they doing? Let us in. Let us in. We believe you now. But it was too late. The flood came and took them all away. And then Jesus reiterates. He just says, hey, this is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man, at my coming. In other words, when Jesus comes back, people will be living as if he's not coming back. People will be the same, that's not true. That's sci-fi nonsense. There's no way that's going to happen. You believe all that stuff? I can't believe you believe that stuff. But then Jesus gives us some more examples of what life will look like. He says, 2 men, again, just kind of telling us, this is how life will be in those days. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. Do you see what Jesus is saying? He's saying life is going to be completely ordinary. Let me apply this to Middle Georgia. 2 people will be sitting in traffic on Watson Boulevard. One taken, the other left. 2 students will be sitting in algebra class at Houston County High School. One taken, the other left. 2 nurses will be walking down the same Emory Hospital hallway. One taken, the other left. 2 coworkers will be eating lunch at my father's place. One taken, the other left. That's what Jesus is saying. Everything, in an instant, in a moment, when he returns, everything will change. And this same event will produce 2 opposite responses, just like in Noah's day. Noah's family rejoicing. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened. We're saved. The people who didn't believe, destroyed. And some are going to be, and I'm in this company, I hope many of you are with me, some are going to be overjoyed at Jesus' return if I'm still alive. I'm going to be overjoyed. But others are going to be overwhelmed at Jesus' return. They're going to be like, oh, I can't believe that's actually what happened. I didn't think that was even possible. Some will experience blessing and your faith will be made sight. And others will realize they should have put their faith in Jesus much sooner. And what this means more than anything else is this: the return of Jesus will be the greatest day in history for those of us who belong to him. But it will be the worst imaginable for those who don't. They'll be on the outside looking in. And that's exactly why Jesus doesn't want people to merely know when he's coming back. He wants people to be ready, to be alert, to be prepared for when he does, which is why he says these words next. He says, in light of this, therefore, in light of all that I've just said, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this: if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man, again, another name for Jesus, will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Jesus just says he's coming like a thief in the night. I don't know about you, but when I was in school, there were 2 words that I and every student that I know of hated hearing, and it was the 2 words pop quiz. Did you hate these words like I hated these words? I hated the words pop quiz because I didn't have time to get ready. I was a good student. I liked to study and be on my game and be ready. If I knew a test was coming, a paper was coming, I was going to get ahead of the game. I was going to be ready. It was going to be the best paper. I was going to get the best possible grade. And I was going to be ready. But whenever a teacher would announce, hey, clear your desk, it's time for a pop quiz, I would freak out. Why would I freak out? Because I wasn't ready. This wasn't planned. This is unexpected. How are we supposed to do well on something like this? And of course, if the teacher told you on a Monday, well, yeah, I got time. I'll get ready. I see that Friday's coming. I'll be ready for that quiz. But a pop quiz doesn't work that way, right? It shows up unexpectedly. And you're either ready for that quiz or you're not. And that's exactly what Jesus is saying about his return. He's saying my return is going to be unannounced and unexpected. It will be like a thief in the night. And if you're ready, that's great. But if you're not, the reality is we don't, and this would be great if we did, but we won't get a countdown clock. He's not going to get, hey, 24 hours, I'm going to be there, get ready, and just count us down. I think all of us would be ready in those moments, wouldn't we? We won't get a reminder, notification on our phone. Well, it's not an app for that, okay? We won't get one last opportunity. He's going to give us a moment, one last opportunity to get our lives together. He is coming like a thief in the night. Now, of course, his point is that if you know when a thief is coming to try and break in your house, you can prepare for that, right? And in Middle Georgia, we'd make sure that we're locked and loaded, right? I mean, we're ready. Oh, you want to come in and break into my house? You're not going to enjoy what happens next. But if you're not ready, what does that mean? If you're not aware a thief's coming, what does that mean? You have to always be ready. You have to always be prepared. You have to always be on guard. You have to always be on your toes. And what Jesus is implying or even saying is say, hey, since you can't predict his coming, you need to prepare for it. Since you can't know when, you need to assume when is in the next 5, 10 seconds. You need to always be ready. Since you can't possibly calculate, do the math, run the numbers, and come back with an answer, you need to make sure you're always ready, that you're always prepared whenever that may be. Now, if you're newer to church, and some of you are, maybe you got dragged here today, and some of this, perhaps all of this is like, man, this is a little too much for me. Like, honestly, feels a lot like science fiction. I think I've seen some movies like this. And honestly, it would be easy for me not to believe some of this as well if this was some random person making predictions about the future. But this isn't Nostradamus with some sort of general vague, prophecy. This isn't a fortune cookie. This isn't that Zoltar on the other side of that glass and you put a quarter in and you can take it to no, it's none of those things. This is Jesus saying all of this. And that's what makes all of this so credible. Now, you still don't have to believe. In fact, you can believe whatever you want and whoever you want to believe about the end of the world if you want to. That's your prerogative. You can absolutely believe whatever you want to believe. You can believe the guy on the sidewalk with the megaphone, right? You know this guy? Turn or burn, get saved or get microwaved, that guy. You can believe the best-selling author who's he's unlocked the secrets of the Bible. But for me, I'm going to believe the one who rose from the dead. That's who I'm going to believe. That's who I'm going to trust. That's who I'm going to put my faith in. And because I believe him, I'm going to live every day as if Jesus could return at any moment, because that's what he said. He said we need to be ready, prepared, that he's coming like a thief in the night. Now, after hearing all that Jesus has had to say, and again, you can read so much more of Matthew 24 on your own. I really do hope, if not, I've failed miserably. I hope none of you are asking, but Matt, wait a second. I'm just curious. When is Jesus coming back? If you've been asleep, no one knows, right? No one knows. No one can know. No one will know until he comes back. I get why you're asking that question. I would love to know the answer to that question, but that's not an answer we're going to get this side of eternity. The question, instead, that Jesus wants us to ask is what? Will I be ready when he does? Will I be prepared when he finally does show up? Now, with all that said, if you're new around here, we love to ask a question every single week, and it's this question. What does all of this have to do with all of us? Like, what is this, what Jesus said some 2,000 years ago now? Like, how are we supposed to bring that forward? What are we supposed to do with that, Matt? How does this apply to our modern, contemporary lives? And I've got 3 really specific applications for specific groups of people in the room. And the first group, I want to encourage you, because some of us, let's be honest, we are alert and ready. It's not that we're perfect. I'm not saying that, okay? I'm just saying, in general, we live with this sense that Jesus could come back at any moment. We understand that he's coming like a thief in the night, like an unannounced pop quiz. And as a result, we are alert and ready. We are prepared. And if that's you, I want to encourage you, whatever you do, don't become spiritually sleepy, spiritually drowsy. Like, stay alert, stay awake. Have gospel conversations with the people you know who aren't where you are yet, that need to know that Jesus is coming back and that there's an urgency to responding to him today. So some of us are alert and ready. Some of us, though, if I can just change this slightly, we think we are alert and ready. We assume that we're we're alert and ready. Some of us think we're prepared because somewhere along the way we prayed a prayer, or we got in some water and got dunked, or we joined a church, maybe even this one. And don't misunderstand, there's nothing wrong with any of those things, and we encourage all of those things. We want people to ask Jesus to be their Lord and Savior. We encourage people to make it public by being baptized. We want you to be a part of our church family. But those are things you do when you've put your faith in Jesus, not instead of putting your faith in Jesus. Those are the things you stack on top of the foundation that is Jesus. And those things are good and fine when they flow out of a genuine relationship with Jesus. In fact, if you didn't know, and some of you are in this category, honestly, you may not be prepared to admit this, but you can know a lot about Jesus and still not really know Jesus. You can have all the answers to the Bible trivia. You can know all the books of the Bible in order and still not really have a personal, real relationship with God through Jesus. And if that's you, if all you have is religion, some sort of moral obligation because grandma raised you in church, you're missing out. You may think you're ready, but you're not ready. You need to surrender your life to Jesus. Give him everything and make him Savior and Lord today. And that leads me to let me actually say this. The only way to be ready for the next time he comes is to respond to why he came the first time. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Finally, the last group. Some of us are not alert and ready at all, and we know this. Some of us are even proud. We'd say we're even proud of this. And I don't know why you're not ready. Not alert, not ready. Maybe you feel like, man, I have way too many questions about God and Christianity and faith, and nobody's been able to answer those questions. And maybe you just feel like you have just too many questions and nobody can answer them. Or maybe you've been hurt by church somewhere in your past. You had a bad church experience. Maybe you had multiple bad church experiences. Maybe you've just convinced yourself, hey, I'll get to that later, at an appropriate time, years down the road, when I'm older, when I'm wiser, I'll revisit Christianity. I'll revisit what Jesus said. Whatever your reason, Jesus says you're a lot like the people in Noah's day. I mean, don't you think if we could go back and interview those people, don't you think they had legitimate reasons from their perspective for believing that Noah was crazy? For believing that Noah was out of his mind. And then it started to rain. And they realized, I think we've made a massive mistake. And I don't want their story to be your story. I don't want anybody connected to this place to have the same sort of story. I don't want you to spend your whole life putting Jesus off, only discover when he shows up, it's too late to put your faith and trust in him. It's entirely too late. Now, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about the fact that Jesus is coming again, but before we can really truly get ready for his second coming, we have to take some time and appreciate why he came the first time. And if you don't know why he came the first time, it's really simple. Jesus came because God loves you and wants a relationship with you. Jesus himself said, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him, puts their faith in him, places their trust in him, will not perish, will not spend eternity apart from him, but will spend it forever with the Lord. And if there's never been a moment in your life where you've recognized who Jesus is, forget about the end times and when Jesus is coming back and what does that look like and how all that's going to go. You need to understand that God loves you so much that he sent his son to live a perfect, sinless life, die a substitutionary death, a death in your place for your sake. He rose again. Jesus rose again to prove that he could do and he was all that he said he was. And this morning, he extends the invitation to you to bow the knee, to surrender everything to him, to give your life to him in faith and trust. And if there's never been a moment in your life when you've done that, I want to invite you to do that today. Because one day, he is coming again. I absolutely believe that. He is coming again, and we need to be ready. And if you don't know him, you're not ready. And I don't know when he's going to come. You don't know. No one knows. But we do know that he is coming and that we have a responsibility to be ready. And I want you to know that you know him.
Thank you so much for watching our sermon today. Our mission statement here at Southside, it's simple. It's to love God, love people, love the world on the journey to life change. No matter where you are on your journey, we want to be a part of it. Whether that's through baptism, joining the church, or so much more, we want to help you take that next step. So go to Southside.Church online or download our Southside.Church app. Thanks so much again for tuning in today, and we hope to see you in person at Southside soon.